Welcome to SEGA Saturn SHIRO, the only podcast that comes directly out of Portugal. My name is Patrick, and today we have a very special episode where we have 3 guests from one country, and that country is, as you guessed it, Portugal. So would you guys like to, before we start, go around and introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name is Stika, or at least on YouTube it is Stika. My real name is Gonçalo. I have a small YouTube channel dedicated to retro gaming, where I occasionally not only review retro games, but talk about Portuguese and Brazilian gaming history.
And an awesome channel it is.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, it is.
How about Nuno?
Hello guys, it's a pleasure to be here. For those who don't know me yet, I'm Nuno, as I just said, and I'm part of the Saturn Junkyard project. I've been a part of the Saturn Junkyard ever since almost the very start, and nowadays I mostly show up on the Titancast, which is our podcast dedicated to all things Saturn, and sometimes even things that are not directly related to Saturn, but just related to Sega in general. And I'm also the main content producer to the Saturn Junkyard YouTube channel. So if you guys want to check that out, be my guest.
Yeah, got some great videos on emulation that I thought is very fantastic, at least in my opinion, because I don't really dabble in emulation too much, but I really love the video effort and the information that it provides.
Thanks
Agreed.
a lot, man. Appreciate it.
I liked your Jet Set Radio for the Xbox video. I watched that one fairly recently and haven't had a chance to try it out yet on my computer, but that's given me the motivation to put it on my list and give that a go. So
Great, man.
And finally, we have Roberto.
So my name is Roberto. I'm an admin for the Saturn Junkyard, the Saturn collectors and gamers, and also recently SEGA Saturn Portugal. The Saturn is my first and only console I have. I don't know if it's out of love, but I'm not. I don't like new games that much because they all seem copies of each other. And when I see a game I like, I play it on the computer. There's no really original games like before.
That's understandable. Yeah, definitely can't get games like that were on the Saturn before, for sure.
Agreed.
I gotcha. All right, and then with us today are our usual your SHIRO, Dave, Peter, and Nick.
So do we want to start by going around the circle and having each one of you guys tell us your Saturn story, or how you came to know and love the console?
Sure. Go ahead, Nuno or Roberto.
When I was a kid, I used to love reading DuckTales comics, and on the back there was an ad for a Mega Drive, and everyone in my area had the Mega Drive. I play with them, and they swapped games with each other, and I started saving money to get a Mega Drive so I could swap games with them. But then I saw the Daytona commercial. Reality always hurts, and I got hooked. And instead of a Mega Drive, I bought a Saturn in 1996. I recently found the receipt. I have it in my hand. I bought the Saturn on July 9th, 1996.
Oh wow, that's cool. You have the exact date and stuff for that.
Yeah. I can even tell you the time. No, I can't. I bought a Model 1 that came with 3 games. Daytona, Virtua Fighter Remix, and International Victory Goal. It's kind of funny because the distributor they supplied the Virtua Fighter remix, but on the sleeve of the box they have the characters of Virtua Fighter 2. It's kind of funny game. Yeah. Um, yeah, I was probably the first in my area to get a Saturn, and my second game, um of course, it had to be Sega Rally. I bought it. I bought it in August 22nd. I know that because a friend of mine, it's his birthday on that day, and when I went to his party, everyone was asking about the Sega Rally. How was it? How's it feel? How it drives? Yeah, it's cool. I haven't played that much, but yeah, uh, things back then were different. Nowadays we have the internet, and you base your thought on reviews, and back then we purchased magazines and we tested the games. It's different experience. And since
Yeah, just
then,
rolling the dice on it.
yeah, and since then I've been collecting whatever comes uh, in front of me that looks like a good deal, and I'm about 16 games away of finishing the PAL set.
Oh, nice. Congrats.
Cool.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, and I have
Gotcha.
a lot of bits and bobs, some rare stuff, a lot of magazines. Dave knows that. Magazines, flyers, brochures in French, English, Portuguese.
Yeah,
Uh,
I would agree that Roberto has one of the most impressive European Saturn collections that I've seen, for sure.
and you haven't seen it all.
No, I know. I haven't.
So I'm curious, Roberto, what out of the 16 games you've got remaining, what are the ones that you think are going to be the hardest for you to track down?
Well, I was one of the lucky ones that bought Panzer Dragoon Saga and Courier Crisis new on the store. Um, Also, another rare game nowadays. It's Deep Fear, and I bought it probably 15 years ago for real a very good price. So I have almost all the made all the rare games and the expensive ones. So I think my the one I'm missing that probably is going to be difficult to find. It's in the hunt. The
Oh, okay,
Oh,
yeah.
that's a good one though.
Yeah, all the remaining ones are really cheap and really easy to find. And I have a friend that he's thinking of selling his collection, so I got first dibs on the remaining 16. So
Excellent.
let's see.
Nice. I hope you get it.
Yeah, me too.
What about you, Nuno? Can you tell us a little about your experience with the Saturn and growing up with a Sega in general?
Sure. So, to give you some context, I'm 32 years old. I was born in '99, and the Saturn was my very first console. I begged my parents for a console. They held out for a couple of years. Basically, all of my friends already had consoles, although none of them had a Saturn yet. Most of them had Master Systems. If you guys have watched Stika's video, you will guess why that is. I grew up in a rural area, very low income, so the Master System was usually the most accessible in terms of price. Most of my friends had Master Systems, although some did have the Mega Drive, which was already a big improvement. And for some time, I didn't have any, so I just kept begging my parents until they finally agreed to buy me a console. I can't be exactly sure when, unlike Roberto, I just can't really say for sure when they did buy me the Saturn. I think it was probably, if I had to guess, I would say it was in 1997. So I would have been 88 years old. And why did I choose the Saturn in particular? Basically, and this is already going into the topic of this podcast. I chose the Saturn for the very simple reason that Sega was really all I was aware of. I mean, I did know that there were some other brands, some other consoles, but Sega was just so dominating, even for a kid who didn't follow gaming news. Like back then, I didn't buy gaming magazines or anything like that. As I said, I grew up in a small village, so I just wasn't really aware of the state of the games market. But I did know about Sega because, excuse me, as I just said, all of my friends had Sega consoles, either the Master System or the Mega Drive. And I just knew about Sega. There were Sonic cartoons on the TV. There was also a video game show on TV on one of the main open channels, which was Temple dos Jogos, Games Temple, which Stick already also talked about in his video. And this show was really big because, as I just said, unless you were buying gaming magazines, there was just no other way to keep in touch with the new games that were coming out. And that show was really amazing because, unlike the magazines, you could actually watch gameplay of the games. And those guys gave Sega just a huge coverage, and the Saturn in particular. I remember in the years in the years before my parents finally bought me my Saturn, they would always talk about the Saturn all the time. Like most of the coverage in that gaming show on Prime TV would be about the Saturn. So there was just no doubt in my mind whatsoever about what was the console that I wanted. I wanted a Saturn because it was from Sega, and Sega was the de facto manufacturer of video game consoles in Portugal at the time. And the Saturn was their latest and greatest machine. It was the games already came in CDs, which looked so futuristic compared to the cartridges that came before. And the games were in 3D, not just exclusively 2D like in the previous consoles. And the Saturn was just amazing. It was the greatest thing ever, and I wanted one, and I got one, and I loved it. I still do. That's why I'm here, so many years later, talking about it still. So yeah, that's in short my story with the Saturn.
Yeah, Sega really pushed hard in a lot of those countries in that area, like in sort of in South America and Portugal and Spain. That area is quite a bit, at least in comparison to Nintendo.
Oh yeah, Nintendo just didn't register. At least until the Game Boy. The Game Boy got very popular eventually, and the Game Boy Color they got very popular. But in terms of home consoles, I mean, even to the up to the N64, it just and even later in terms of home
Even the Wii
consoles, I
wasn't
think
that
they
popular.
didn't become really popular until the Wii. I mean, even the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube just weren't that popular. They just weren't.
Fair
Which is
enough. All
probably
right.
really weird for someone coming from America, where Nintendo was
Yeah,
this huge monolith.
yeah. It's really funny. Like it seems like Nintendo's focus was on the North American continents, particularly Canada and the United States. in comparison to the rest of the world, where it seemed like they didn't really care much. Even in Europe, I mean, I still hear people say that Nintendo was still like the second place almost for most of that time. So it's just funny to me in that regards. But I think hopefully we'll go over that a little bit later in some of the next questions. But what about you, Stika? Did I say it right, Stika?
It's fine. It's usually Stika, but it's fine. Don't worry.
Stika. I see your name all the time. I just never know how to pronounce it.
So it happens all the time. I sometimes regret choosing this name.
Stika, I'll try my best.
No, it's fine. No worries. Well, first of all, I want to say, after hearing Nuno's story, I kind of want to give him a high five because I too kind of know what was like being born on a poorer family whose parents didn't want to spend a lot of money on video game consoles. I was born in a city near Lisbon called Almada, which I've heard being described as to Lisbon what Brooklyn is to New York, I guess. So that should give you a bit of an idea, I suppose.
It sure does.
But I was actually the rare Nintendo fan as a kid, the very rare one. As a kid, a friend of my brother's had a Super Nintendo, and when I compared to the Mega Drive and I saw, for example, how much better the graphics were or the sound were on Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or Killer Instinct, like I was a huge Nintendo fanboy at the time. But when the 32-bit generation came around, the Saturn was the one that grabbed my attention. And I think part of it was just how the games looked. Well, first of all, there was just a lot of promotion for the Saturn. And the N64 didn't come until later. I didn't know anyone who, even when it came out in Portugal, I didn't know anyone who owned an N64 versus the Saturn until much later. Nuno already mentioned Temple dos Jogos, or the Games Temple, which was a news, reviews, and previews TV show in primetime television, which it talked about all systems, but for the first year, the Saturn was the big one, most likely also the biggest sponsor, I'm going to guess. And I remember just thinking just how much of a leap it was going from the Mega Drive or Super Nintendo to the Saturn, even though I could never actually own one. And in fact, I did not own a Saturn during those days. Like I said, I was a bit poor, and I didn't even own a 32-bit system or a 16-bit system or an 8-bit system for that matter. I had a Famiclone, so the cheapest of all options, a bootleg Nintendo console basically, with 42 games in its memory, basically very early Famicom games in its memory, and that's pretty much most of what I had throughout through my childhood. And every time I saw the Saturn on a toy shop or television or whatever, seeing Virtua Fighter or Sega Rally or Clockwork Knight or whatever, and then I went back and all I had was like Mario Brothers or the original Super Mario. Just, man, that feeling of jealousy I cannot put into words, I suppose. But
in what aspect?
Well, mostly because I only had an 8-bit system while everyone was like playing already 3D games, polygonal games. Just I was basically 3 generations behind, I suppose. So that was actually a huge defining characteristic for my childhood and my video game history, I suppose, my video game tastes. But there was just something about the Saturn that I really enjoyed because the 2D games looked great. I remember like being marveled at X-Men: Children of the Atom, but then it also had like some great 3D games, and to me it was the system to get, even though I couldn't afford it. And by the time I could afford a 32-bit system, the Saturn was already dead, so I had to go for the PlayStation. And in fact, I did not buy a Saturn until I was in college, somewhat in 2005, 2006. So way after the Saturn was dead, and that's when I got my first Saturn through an old schoolmate of mine who had his, and I bought it from him. I still have it. I eventually modded it so it runs games in either 50 hertz or 60 hertz, depending on which setting I set the switch. And I've tried building up a modest collection. I have about like 60 or 70 games, I suppose. I try to go for the rarer ones, but the Saturn was kind of like, you know, the one that got away, the one you always kept pining for. To me, that was the Saturn, I suppose.
No, that's understandable. I kind of can relate to that. Like it's one of the Sega systems that slipped through my fingers when I first was playing that, and I didn't really get to play it till around that time that you got it around 2005.
Yeah, it's. I guess I was kind of lucky because the thing is, growing up in Portugal, because the Saturn was so successful, buying Sega Saturns and Sega Saturn games was actually not that expensive for a long time. I've bought like games like Resident Evil, Shinobi, Shining Force for honestly paltry prices. Like I think I bought a complete in-box copy of Shinobi for the Saturn for like 20 bucks or 20 euro, depending how you want it to which currency you want to use. But again, 20 bucks for a complete copy of Shinobi, that's crazy today. You're never going to find that either PAL or US.
It hurts to hear. It's painful.
But it's not just Shinobi. It was like KO2 Flying Squadron, Resident Evil, Shining Force 3. In fact, all Shining games that were released in Europe. I bought them for like paltry prices. So it was a really good time to collect for the Saturn. So even though I was a latecomer, because the Saturn was so successful here, you could buy a lot of secondhand Saturn games for really cheap. And most people didn't really know they had them. Like, you could buy literally complete copies of Panzer Dragoon or Panzer Dragoon Y for under 20 bucks. Like 15 bucks, you'd get a complete copy of Panzer Dragoon Y.
Ouch.
Ouch, indeed. Yes. Very difficult to hear in 2021.
Yes, it is, sadly. The high prices have reached here as well.
Yeah, it's not a fun time to be a Saturn fan right now if you want to buy games physically.
Yeah, sadly, I haven't bought a Saturn game in like 2 or 3 years. I kind of been priced out of the market, sadly.
Many have.
Yeah,
Yes.
After paying like $800 for Magic Knight, I think I'm good.
Ooh, damn.
Yeah, a lot of trade bait for that.
Yeah, you talked about Temple of the Games. I remember back then we only had 4 channels on a TV,
Yes.
and that show was on the third channel. That was a new station that was launched probably in '92. They have really good shows for teens and other stuff, because the main two channels were um, kind of old and news and kind of, I don't know, directly. Um, they have a more, how do you say, they were targeted
It
more.
was edgier, I guess. They were
Yeah,
targeting-
more older people.
Yeah.
And the third channel came with different shows and became very popular. But the first channel, they saw the success of Temple of the Games, and I don't know if you remember this, but they made a show named Cybermaster, where they
Oh, I
had
love that show.
they had a tournament, and they travel all over the country to find the best gamers, and then they will do the TV show with the best gamers, and they played Sega Rally on Versus. I can't remember other games they played back then, but I remember the final game, the tournament was Virtua Fighter 2, and
Um,
I have a brochure here, a Portuguese one, um, where they offered an exclusive Sega Rally T-shirt, and the first prize was about 500 euros back then in Sega product.
Wow, that would
Yeah,
be a great prize.
yeah,
Um,
but back then it was huge, and the second it it's half of that, and the third one it's half of the half.
the thing about Cybermaster, that show was honestly incredible because, like Roberto said, imagine like
It was cheesy as
oh,
hell.
it was, but like imagine
They
like
were all dressed in cyberpunk and
yes,
Hell
yes.
yeah.
Imagine like a competition. It was just Sega. It was completely sponsored by Sega. No other systems.
yeah.
And like it was all cyberpunky. And no joke. There was so much like BDSM overtones in that show. Like I'm not even kidding. They literally would get the presenter was like a runway model, which was always wearing like tight leather or corsets or whatever, and then they would put her in chains. And this would air Saturday morning for kids.
No
So-
flipping way.
It is amazing. I have actually made a video about it if you want to check later.
Oh my
the
God.
show is amazing. It like seriously, they would put her in chains or cages or whatever. Or sometimes they would like strap kids to chairs and they were like, okay, now go play Virtual Fighter. The loser dies. And like, oh, it was always the loser canonically would always die. It's not like, oh, he's being sent to the Shadow Realm. No. If that kid's your neighbor, that kid is dead. He was fucking murdered. Sorry, can I?
We can censor it. It's okay.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
He was murdered. It was amazing.
That's
So
madness.
can we get this show with subtitles, please? Because I kind of
I
want to watch
haven't.
it now.
I did it. I've already did it.
Yeah, I
You
want to
did
see
it.
this.
Yes.
I already
Oh,
did
that's
it.
great.
I did
That-
a video on it and I subtitle as well.
Everyone you've told about this outside of Portugal has probably already said this, but that would not fly in the US for sure.
Oh, I know. It's the show is simply amazing. Sadly,
That's
on season two, they toned it down. I'm guessing they got a lot of complaints, basically. Also, there was a villain. The villain who would kill the kids. He would say a lot of things that they were just so filled with innuendo. Like a lot of times the things he said, he sounded more like a pedophile. To be honest, it's
Oh,
really
geez.
weird. This show, I'm not even gonna lie, but it was so amazing.
I
It was
mean, to be
awesome.
fair, Saturn's mascot in Japan beat up a bunch of kids coming home
Yeah.
from their baseball practice. So, and terrorized kids on Christmas morning. So, it's,
I
it's,
saw that.
yeah.
The only mascot we got was the PGA champion Craig Stadler, and that was it.
I saw all the memes. I saw the memes.
He's well loved.
Good.
To make
He's-
it
he's the
even
best.
funnier,
I have a question. So, okay, I watched your video, Stika. It was great, as other folks had said, and definitely gave some excellent context to what was going on. It was amazing to hear that there was like a simultaneous console war, like between like 3 different generations of consoles: 8-bit, 16-bit, and 32-bit, and it really just had to do with your economic status, which way you went. But it seemed like the turning point that you mentioned was this one game. I don't know, this one like
Yes.
catastrophic, game to rule all games. Tell us about this game. Why is this game so important?
I believe me and Nuno actually talked about it like a day or two before this podcast. But like, basically, I love saying this. In Portugal, Sega was both saved and doomed by Dragon Ball. Saved because Dragon Ball: The Legend was an exclusive to the Saturn in Europe. It launched in Japan. It launched both the PlayStation and the Saturn, but in Europe it only launched for the Saturn. And literally every kid wanted this game. It was like Final Fantasy VII for the PS1 or Halo for the Xbox.
Wait, but why?
Because the thing is, Dragon Ball aired in Portugal well before it did in the US. But we actually started with the original Dragon Ball. I don't know if you guys know the anime.
Oh man, yeah, I love original Dragon
sure.
Ball.
We
That's
started with the original Dragon Ball first. We got everything in order, and then we moved on to Z as soon as the original one ended. And by
then
the
you had
time-
to skip GT, right?
No, sadly, GT did air as well. It was
I
terrible.
gotcha.
And like as soon as I would say around the time that Dragon Ball Z started airing in the US, I would say we were already at the Cell saga, give or take. So we're pretty far ahead. So basically, Dragon Ball Z The Legend launched in Portugal right during the peak of Dragon Ball Z popularity, and it was for a new 32-bit system. So the graphics looked amazing, the gameplay looked amazing. Spoiler alert: it wasn't. The game was terrible. Um,
Yeah.
but it looked great. It was Dragon Ball, so every kid wanted it. And the funniest thing, at least for me, is that everybody loved the game despite how terrible it was. I think we somehow convinced ourselves that it was good, and no, it wasn't.
I
And,
gotcha.
and
Hey,
that's
also
classic.
unrelated, but was Yu Yu Hakusho popular in Portugal at all?
I
Totally
don't
not
think it
asking
ever
for another
aired here,
cast I
to be
do.
honest. I know of the show. I know it was super popular in Brazil. I don't think it ever aired here, though. If it didn't, I never saw it, at least, or don't know anyone who saw it.
I gotcha.
What
Yeah,
topic?
sorry.
What show? Sorry.
Yu Yu Hakusho.
I think it was
anime.
called Ghost Fighters and Ghosts or Spirit Hunters or Spirit Fighters or something in
No,
another
I
country.
can't remember that one.
But there was a release, a game released, I think on the 3DO, like a fighting Yu Yu Hakusho fighting game on the 3DO in Europe.
Yes,
I-
there
I
was.
might- Yeah, so like I don't know, maybe a little bit.
The thing is,
Fair enough.
neither the 3DO or the Jaguar, I don't know if they even ever launched here, to be honest. They might have, but they would have like zero visibility, I think. Maybe Nuno and Roberto can
I don't know
chime in.
anyone that has one.
No,
Yeah,
me neither. I think if you wanted one, you would have to like ask the owner of the store if he could like import one specifically for you, or stores that just dealt with import goods in general. But in terms of like a widespread release, I don't think so.
Fair enough. Also, I'm sorry for the tangent on that one, but I guess getting back to Dragon Ball. So basically, Dragon Ball sort of perpetuated and was the hype, essentially in Portugal, where everyone wanted to get the system with Dragon Ball on it, right?
Mm-hmm. And as the years went on, sometimes 97, 98, I can't remember the year right now, the PlayStation finally fought back when it released Dragon Ball GT Final Bout. So another Dragon Ball game, basically. And suddenly everyone was like, oh my god, this one's polygonal! Because the Saturn one was like a mix of 2D and 3D. So the backgrounds and the arenas were 3D, but the fighting characters were 2D sprites, basically.
Spoilers, that one is also very bad.
I would argue it's even worse, to be honest.
That's what I was
So,
going to
but
ask. Which one is better?
They were both terrible, but they were both system sellers, basically. So
Did they actually use the same voice actors?
no,
that
all
was in
Japanese.
Portugal.
Japanese.
Oh, it was all
voice acting.
Japanese.
Which
Oh,
is a
because
shame
in the
because-
U.S. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say that because in the U.S., the Dragon Ball GT Final Bout, they actually replaced all the all the voice actors are completely different. Like, I think Steve Bloom did the voice of Goku or something, and there are a lot of vocal changes. Like, it's not like the U.S. cast like they'd imagine now. But I just thought it was funny and see if they did the same thing in like the European countries as well.
Do you guys know of any kind of analogy to this where there was like a really terrible game that sold a system? Like I'm trying to think if that has happened in any other country.
Halo.
Halo.
Oh,
dude.
Oh,
Okay.
shots have been fired.
Uh-oh.
That's a spicy opinion.
That take is a little too hot there.
A little bit too hot. No, I'm just messing around. No, I love Halo.
Good. Okay.
I was just trying to think of something.
I honestly can't.
Oh, E.T. I think sold a bunch of Atari 2600s.
That might be a good.
Oh, you
Yes,
know
it-
what? You're right. On popularity alone.
Although
and then
the Dragon Ball couldn't have been that bad. Like you don't see
Oh, it's
copies
terrible.
of that in landfills.
Oh, it's
It's-
terrible. It's really
it's not
terrible.
great. I've tried. I wanted to like it.
See. But also, just so you know, the
It's
Portuguese
an acquired taste.
sorry,
It's required.
kind of.
It's a delicacy.
Yeah, but back then, Dragon Ball was so, and even Z was so successful here in Portugal because it was dubbed in Portuguese, and they would make funny jokes that were popular with the events that were going on in society. I remember back then with the how's it how's the character called in English, Majibu, I think.
Majin Buu, yeah.
Yeah, in Portugal we it was called Bubu, and,
Yeah.
and yeah, and back then there was a popular song that a girl was singing. It's something like "You keep calling me, baby," and they transferred that song to the character, and he started singing on the show. You keep calling me, boo boo.
The best
Yeah,
one too.
they changed, and
Yeah.
they had they they made a lot of funny jokes about everything was going on TV and society. That's why it was so popular, because you could laugh in the cartoons with everything that was going on back then.
Basically, the Portuguese dub was like an abridged series, like no joke.
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys seen Dragon Ball Z abridged.
Oh,
or if
do
you're
I
fam-
love DBZ abridged?
Okay, it was basically like that, except it was official. Literally, you would get random references, random jokes, like a monster would appear and Goku would say, "Oh my God, it's Miss Portugal '97" or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
Oh Jesus!
That is
it
yeah,
was
awesome.
exactly.
it was
exactly.
terrible and amazing at the same time.
I'm just curious. Was there? Can you think of a single Saturn game that everyone or close to everyone loved that was actually good? What would you
Yeah.
say was like another epic game that was like a must-have?
I can think of something, but let Roberto and Nuno go first. I think I'm talking too much. I might be hogging the mic.
Um,
Like
Probably.
universally loved.
Probably Sega Rally, of course.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sega Rally was up there. Tomb Raider, Resident Evil, Virtua Fighter 2, Fighter's Mega Mix. It's just whenever I see people selling their Sega Saturn collections, one of these is always in that collection. Just
Yeah.
at least one of these, at least.
And also we had a special console version that came with Tomb Raider or even Dragon Ball. It was a Model 2, but it has I have it here on the flyer. Uh, yeah, and also on the back cover a lot of VHS tapes for Dragon Ball. Yeah, they're announcing VHS tapes.
Yeah,
for-
I'm
You
jealous
know-
of you guys in Europe that got those like special boxes, special Saturn console boxes, like pack-ins. That speaks to how much more successful it was in Europe and definitely in Portugal. Just that you guys got that kind of stuff, and all we got was the plain box. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in 97 we had a special version that came with Tomb Raider and a VHS of Dragon Ball Z and a Pocket Boy.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a small a small Game Boy that has
Tetris.
yeah, Tetris and another games that it's so small that I remember friends of mine using that as a keychain.
Yeah, it was basically like a Tetris LCD thingy. I
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
to compete
yeah.
with the Game Boy or whatever. But yeah,
Those,
I didn't
those
know that.
mini McDonald's games.
I didn't know the Saturn came bundled with that. There was a bundle with an LCD Tetris console in here. I did not know that actually. That's hilarious.
That's why I have
Gotcha.
the flyers.
The
Yeah, I
bundle
think we
with,
can
with the
Oh, sorry, I'll let you go,
VHS
Nuno,
tape.
sorry.
That bundle with the VHS tape. I actually didn't know about that. Never saw that, but it's easily understandable if you realize, and this is something that is important to understand the context of the Saturn in Portugal, which is the local distributors, which once again is something that Stika covered in his video. because Sega in Portugal was. I don't think. First of all, I don't think they either Sega or Nintendo had local offices. I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think they mostly worked through local distributors, local companies that basically bought their stuff and sold it here and adapted it in some cases. And Nintendo was working through Concentra, which was a toy company. Sega, on the other hand, they took a very different approach. I don't know if it was Sega's decision or if it was the actual company that approached Sega proposing the deal. But they were distributed in Portugal by Ecofilms, which they didn't deal with toys. They dealt with movies and music, mostly movies in my experience, both like regular Hollywood movies and also anime and cartoons and stuff like that. So yeah, that they would make a bundle with both games and movies, for them it would make perfect sense because they already dealt with all of that stuff. So it wouldn't involve extra deals with an external company or anything like that. They could do all of that in house. And I think that also goes a long way to explain their strategy for promoting the Saturn, since, as I just said, they were already used to dealing with different like customers because they both sold regular Hollywood movies and cartoon movies. So they were used to marketing towards both children and adults and teenagers and everyone basically. And they were a really smart company and a really strong company. And I don't think Sega would ever have the success that it did in Portugal if it wasn't for that partnership and the fact that the local company, Ecofilms, who sold Sega consoles and games, if they hadn't done such a great job, like overall great in every aspect, I don't think I think the story of Sega in Portugal would have been completely different.
I agree completely. They really knew how to leverage their movie rights distribution in Portugal. Like in the video, like I mentioned, they changed like the cover of a Master System game to use the Bloodsport 2 cover, for example. Or they seeing as how they had the rights to the movie, they could basically do it, or they could bundle whatever movies or whatever other media they could with their consoles because they held the rights to it. So there were no third parties involved basically.
So then I wonder whether that means that Sega's success in Portugal was almost accidental. Do you know what I mean? Like, like I'm not sure that they consciously made a choice to seek out this one company who they knew would do such a great job marketing, same as like Nintendo and all the other guys consciously chose organizations that maybe wouldn't have done such a good job. I just wonder if it was happenstance, if it was coincidence.
Well, the one thing I learned from all of this is that Dragon Ball just officially wins anime. Like, he just wins it straight up. There's no contest. It straight up just wins it, so sorry
funny,
everything else.
It's a funny story. When I was a boy, I lived in France. So at the age of like 8 or 9, whatever, I can't remember anymore. I remember watching the original Dragon Ball in France, and I think it was dubbed. I don't think it was subbed. And so, yeah, I mean, I recall experiencing that before, coming over to North America before it became big here. So it's kind of a neat tie-in for me personally.
Yeah, it's funny because my friend, my friend's from the Philippines, and he talks about Dragon Ball because he grew up in the U.S. and his family's all from the Philippines. Like, and he's relating to his aunt. Like, oh yeah, his aunt's like, oh yeah, I watched Dragon Ball as a kid, and he's like, oh wow, this is kind of weird now.
Yep.
But I would argue that neither Sega nor Nintendo knew which distributors were good or were bad. So yeah, if Nintendo had chosen Ecofilms, we probably wouldn't even be having this podcast. And I would have made a video saying, "Oh, the N64 was a huge success in Portugal. Nobody wanted the Saturn or the PlayStation." It's entirely possible. The one thing I didn't say in my video because I didn't want to confuse the viewer too much was that Concentra was actually not the first distributor of Nintendo in Portugal. There was one before it. I've heard they actually did a pretty good job, but for whatever reason they changed midway, somewhere around from changing the NES to the SNES, maybe 1992, 93 maybe. I have no idea why they changed distributors, why they chose the worst one that did its job worst of all things. But yes, if would it be accidental because nobody knew which ones were good or terrible distributors? I would say absolutely. Neither Sega or Nintendo had any idea, in my opinion.
I didn't hear you talk much about the N64 in your video. I know you mentioned PlayStation and the fall of Saturn because PlayStation published a Dragon Ball game that Sega didn't. But what about the N64? Like, how was that perceived?
It existed, I guess.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
That's a nice compliment. That's a nice compliment.
Existed about as well as it did in Japan. Then, really.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
It's really okay. There was a lot of hype during its launch. Mario 64 was a pretty big deal. We were talking about the Games Temple or Temple of Games or whatever translation we want to apply. Mario 64 was the first game that the Games Temple gave a maximum score of 100%, and that was a big deal at the time. People were like, "Whoa, they finally gave a perfect score to a game." But the truth is, the Portuguese distributor, Concentra, they never knew how to sell their systems, how to promote them, and even though they got a perfect score on the most watched video game television show in Portuguese history, it once people forgot about the game, it died. And I don't think any other game ever received a lot of hype. Maybe GoldenEye, but that's it. I would argue most kids at the time had never even heard of Legend of Zelda, of I don't know, Perfect Dark, of Banjo-Kazooie.
What about Ocarina?
No, either Ocarina or Majora's Mask. They probably never even heard of those games. That time.
Jeez. Rip.
That's how terrible Nintendo was promoting our country.
Yeah, and I know why, because you said that in your video. We're a poor country, and back then I remember going to the shops and watching the new launches and trying to find a deal on a Saturn game. And I remember back then Saturn games were about 60 euros, and Nintendo 64 games were about 80 or 100.
Very true.
Whoa.
Yeah, they were expensive, and
Yeah.
it's kind of odd because everyone back then was burning CDs, music CDs, and we have the Saturn and the PlayStation that could play CDs, and no one knew what the deal with the N64.
Mm-hmm.
It has a strange remote. Okay, it was the first one that had a rumble pack, but okay, but the console it was expensive at the time, and I remember Turok was around 110, 120 back then. It was very expensive.
So basically, twice as expensive as a regular Saturn game,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and at that point, I actually brought up a good point with the CD player aspect. I mean, it was an easier sell to do this cheaper console that also has a CD player in it versus this giant thing that only play cartridges for a few games that are almost double the price for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's another thing. No, go ahead, Roberto.
No, please. I've already spoken way too much. Go ahead, please.
No, I just wanted to add that if you think about the Nintendo 64 and how popular it was in the US, how much of that was due to nostalgia? How much of that was due to people already being familiar with the NES and the SNES, people being familiar with Mario and with Zelda? That didn't happen in Portugal. I mean, just try to imagine a world like that where you had never heard of Mario or Zelda before, because almost no one had an NES or a Super NES. So this is all new, and yeah, I mean, I knew exactly one kid growing up who had a Nintendo 64. I obviously can't claim this experience to be representative of the whole country, but from what Roberto and Stika are saying, I think we can take that for granted and accept the fact that a Nintendo 64 was really by far the loser of this generation in Portugal, like no question asked. And a
Oh, I
lot of
Yeah,
things
disagree
probably
completely
have to
because
do.
I knew 2 people who owned an N64. No, just kidding. It was terrible.
yeah, no, it's kind of funny, and it makes me wonder. Like, I guess this is probably jumping a little bit ahead, but what your opinion on the U.S. is? I guess more of both all you guys' opinions on the U.S.'s console and the way the consoles worked here in the games, because I think on the internet in particular, the internet is very American centric and North American centric, where a lot of the groups that are people in are always, oh, I want North American only games, or I want
Yeah.
U.S. only games, and this and that, and the collection's not a true collection unless it's North American. But I kind of want to hear your guys' perspective on that a little bit.
Well, truth be told, I created my channel because I felt like I wasn't being represented on YouTube, I guess. I would always watch a lot of YouTubers. In college, I would watch a lot of Angry Video Game Nerd. A lot. Okay, all I can think of right now is the AVGN, but I used to watch a lot of retro gaming YouTubers. It's just that most have stopped in the meantime. But even most...
Yeah, I think the one I can think off the top of my head is like RMX21.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Classic Game Room comes to mind. He was around.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Classic
well,
Game Room.
really good one.
Spoony one before.
Spoonie. I loved Spoonie.
Before. Yeah, we'll stop right there on that
Before
one.
he went crazy, yes.
But yeah, there are little. Yeah, but there's a lot of them. But keep on going. Sorry about.
And no worries. And it just I never felt represented because okay, I know this is a Saturn podcast, but I'm gonna have to back it up a bit because whenever like the Master System was mentioned, which again was a success in Portugal, the Master System, it outsold the NES. It was always like, oh, the Master System. It was that one NES competitor nobody bought, and the games are like the NES's but not as good. And I'm like, no, they're not. There's great Master System games. Come on. Or again, the Sega Genesis. It's always like, yes, the 16-bit wars, they were really tight, but the Genesis eventually lost, and the games were not as good. And I'm like, let's back it up a bit here, Chief. There were some really good Genesis games, man. I prefer the Genesis library over the Super Nintendo, man. And I was a Super Nintendo fanboy as a kid. So, but I actually changed my opinion around. So, let's back it up here. Yes, it has great RPGs, great fighting games, but there's a lot of good stuff on the Genesis. And again, with the Saturn, it's like, oh, the Saturn, that one system nobody bought. The Dreamcast, that one system nobody cared about. The Saturn and Dreamcast were popular here. People bought those games. People loved Sonic Adventure. They loved Clockwork Knight. They played a lot of Bug. They played Phantasy Star. It's just I never felt represented, and eventually I just got to a point where I'm like, okay, I guess I'm creating my own channel.
Yeah, and I think that's great that you did stuff like that, because it's hard to get that perspective. And I mean, it's kind of funny. This might be bold of me to say, but I mean, it's almost like the stuff like the console wars that you see all over the internet, and the discussion is sort of, I guess, irrelevant to a lot of you guys, because the console wars is always Sega and then Nintendo in that case, right?
Yeah, pretty much. In fact, the console wars was Sega and then Nintendo, and then it was Sega and then PlayStation, and then it was just PlayStation and nobody else, basically. That's basically how it went here.
A Portugal monopoly.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, a friend of mine had NES. I played Zelda and Mario. That's what I remember. And another friend had a Super NES, and that's it. All of my friends have Master System or Mega Drive. That's why I was saving money to get a Mega Drive. But then the Saturn launch, and I remember it launched in Portugal for 500 and something escudos, the Portuguese currency back then. I don't know. It was like what, 1,000 euros or
500, I guess, kind of. I honestly forgot how to translate the old
Yeah.
escudo to euro. It's been so long.
Yeah, and one particular thing about Eco Films, the Sega distributor in Portugal, we are the only country that has the manual, an extra manual translated to Portuguese, and they also added a sticker in the front that says warranty Sega Portugal, and on the back they have a sticker with the translated synopsis of the game. That's how you can tell European copies from Portuguese copies.
I hate those, by the way.
It's yeah.
Because they would put like stickers on the Saturn boxes, including the Saturn boxes in Europe, the first models, they were basically cardboard. So if you put a sticker on it and you try to remove it, you're gonna tear the cardboard. So you're gonna have that ugly sticker on your box for all eternity, and I hate that.
They also get a bunch of like fingernail scratches in them,
Yes.
and like, keys,
Yes.
anything that you happen to like rub up against the
Try to
cardboard.
get the sticker out.
It's just almost impossible to refurbish them. You almost have to just like reprint and replace them, which a lot of folks are doing these days, but it's like almost impossible to refurbish them. Yeah, the clamshell ones were better, to be honest.
Oh yeah, way better.
I am curious though. In your video, Stika, you mentioned so Saturn was hugely popular. It was going along, like a freight train, and then all of a sudden it just dried up. Like, it's like you guys all scratched your heads and said, like, what's going on? Like, where are all the games? So obviously it had failed in other parts of the world. And the steady supply of games just kind of dried up. And so take us through that. And then, of course, the rise of the PlayStation overtaking Saturn. How do we get from there to the Dreamcast?
Well, the issue is, like I said, the Saturn was super popular here, but the games they just weren't releasing as many as time went on. It was weird because Resident Evil was popular, everybody was playing Tomb Raider, and then suddenly, Resident Evil 2 is a PlayStation exclusive. Tomb Raider 2, PlayStation exclusive. Have you seen this new cool game called Tekken 3? Looks amazing, but there's no Saturn port, I'm afraid. What about Soul Blade? Oh, sorry, no Saturn port. So what have we got to the Saturn? I guess there's Quake, but... Oh, wait, there's Quake 2 for the PlayStation or the N64. It was just a really weird time where the Saturn... You would go to a game store, you'd see a lot of space dedicated to the Saturn, but a lot of them were already old games. Like you'd be 97, 98, and they would still be selling you like early, like launch Saturn games, for example, which the 32-bit generation had the very interesting characteristic where the graphics evolved very quickly. You can really tell the difference between a game from 95 and a game from 98, and they just looked old. But the PlayStation kept getting new games, and you could literally see the frustration in a lot of Saturn owners back then. I would have a lot of friends who had Saturns, and you'd see like frustrations growing between them and the ones who had PlayStations, because suddenly everybody wanted to play Crash Bandicoot or Spyro the Dragon, or better yet, Metal Gear Solid, which was a very important game here as well. And there was nothing like it on the Saturn. I remember like a friend of mine who was a huge like Saturn fanboy, and he was like, "Oh God, I gotta get something that showed that the Saturn is good." So he went to a game shop, and he bought like 3 games completely blind. Those games were, and I kid you not, Doom, which, ouch.
Oh God.
Yes. There was what was it? An adventure game for the 3DO that also launched for the Saturn. I can't remember.
Was it D?
No, not D. It was part adventure, part first part shooter, part rail shooter. I can't remember right now.
Oh,
Area 51 or
Creature Shock.
Something. I think it was Creature Shock.
We don't have that in Europe.
No. Okay.
Siberia?
Siberia, that's the one. They remember Siberia because they're like, this looks like Metal Gear Solid. Spoiler alert, it's nowhere near Metal Gear Solid.
It's not quite as good.
Yes, and
a little far away.
I've never heard that comparison.
I can't remember what the third game was, but like literally, it like most kids already knew or had the good games, the Virtua Fighters, the Fighters Mega Mix, but like even Sega would like slow down their Saturn releases. So suddenly you'd start doing like blind purchases, and you'd get games like that. which didn't really help. So, at least from the friends I knew, eventually they all either started selling their Saturns or shelving them and begging their parents for a PlayStation. You could literally see the transition happening in front of your eyes, basically.
And what year was that? That was 98, you said?
Oh, it's difficult to tell. I think it was around 97, 98, because I know that I don't know if Metal Gear Solid was already out, but it was at least very close to the Metal Gear Solid hype, very close to that.
Yeah,
Okay, so
I'm going through my brochures here, and I have a flyer from '97 that is talking about Fighting Force, another one that got canceled, and I have here another one from Christmas '96. Soon the most recent successes worldwide, arcade worldwide on exclusive on your Sega Saturn, and it has three pictures of three games: Sega Touring Car, Man XTT, and Virtua Fighter 3. Yeah.
Okay, there's at least one good game in there.
And also I have another brochure here that has a lot of games on discounts. Back then they were starting to selling good games at cheap prices. Games back there were around 60 euros, and I have here Clockwork Knight 2 for 15. This is new. Uh, Exhumed Power Slave 35.
Hell yeah.
Knights 35. Street Fighter Alpha 2 35. Panzer Dragoons Y 25. And on the back they are announcing Magic the Gathering. So another
Wait,
one
what?
that exactly Magic the Gathering.
A game
For
for
the
Magic the
set.
Gathering, or the card game?
Magic the Gathering Battle Mage.
Oh, the PS1 game, yeah. I guess there was
Oh, okay.
I didn't know there was a
Probably.
Saturn port in the making, in development for Battle Mage.
Yeah, I have it here, and also on the footnotes I have Reloaded, Syndicate Wars, Exxon. Yeah, that's it for games that everyone were expecting and they didn't launch. And also, we were talking about the launch of Resident Evil 2 and Tomb Raider 2. That were the main ones that got people changed from Saturn to the PlayStation. And also Portuguese, they like cars, and one of the games that brought people to the PlayStation was Gran Turismo. We don't have anything like it on the Saturn. I remember back then lots of friends that had a PlayStation. They they had to have the Gran Turismo.
Yeah, I forgot about Gran Turismo. That game was huge here.
Yeah,
Huge.
we love our Formula One. We love our rallies. We love our Dakar, and we love cars in general. And what did we have on the Saturn? Sega Rally, Daytona, Sega Touring Car. mm, wasn't that great, but I love it. But Gran Turismo was on another level comparing.
So then where does the Dreamcast come into all this?
Yeah, did Sega's popularity in Portugal carry on with that with the Dreamcast supporting that console?
So about the Dreamcast, I think Sega's fame in Portugal really did carry on. At least this is my personal impression of it. I think the Saturn wasn't like seen as this huge failure. It was just seen as something weird. I mean, why did it end like that? Why did it stop getting ports of sequels of games that it had the first one and then it didn't have the sequel, like Tomb Raider or Resident Evil, as Tika mentioned, or the many cancelled ports that Roberto just mentioned, that at the point of marketing the games when they were still being developed, they were still there were still Saturn ports planned, but then between that point of first marketing the game and finishing development, they had been cancelled. So that was weird, but I don't think a lot of people thought too much about that. I mean, the PlayStation really did get very popular very quickly. So the market really changed just in a couple of years, like from 98 to 2000. So roughly the decline of the Saturn and the release of the Dreamcast, the market shifted significantly, really fast, really hard. But despite that, I think Sega still had a huge following because of all of the stuff that we mentioned already. There were teenagers now that had been kids playing Mega Drive, Master System, Saturn. So the Sega name still carried a lot of weight. And I can't remember specifically about the launch of the Dreamcast, but I clearly remember that at some point the Dreamcast, just like before, the Dreamcast seemed to be everywhere. You would go to a game shop and there would be loads of Dreamcast games to sell. They would have kiosks with consoles that you could play games on to try them on. There were advertisements, there were brochures that would be given out in shopping malls and stuff like that. People would give out flyers and brochures so you could read more. I actually still have one of those, I think, that I read from cover to cover and just gazed at the graphics. I think that was a big selling point because the Dreamcast being the first system of the next generation, the 128-bit generation, the jump in graphic quality was really immense, going from the PlayStation, the most popular, eventually the most popular console of that generation, going from the PlayStation to the Dreamcast. It was just a huge leap, and I think a lot of people were just completely floored by what the Dreamcast was showcasing. I think that was a big selling point, and once again, it just seemed to be everywhere. The marketing was still really strong. It wasn't necessarily aggressive, like in your face, but it was omnipresent. The Dreamcast at a very specific point, because once again, the Dreamcast just seemed to fade from night to day, just like the Saturn did. But for a while, after it had already launched, at least this is my perspective, and I want to know what Roberto and Stika think about this. But the way I remember it, between the Dreamcast launching and eventually it fading away, there was a point where it was really immensely popular, I think.
I agree. When the transitional shift from the Saturn to the Dreamcast, I would say it hurt Sega or Echo Films a little bit. I definitely remember that you didn't see as many commercials or as many sponsorships. I don't think there were any game shows that were exclusive to the Saturn during that time, whereas before you had Cybermaster or whatnot. So it hurt them, but it was still very popular. Like I said in my video, and okay, again, I have no sales numbers, but hopefully Roberto and Nuno will agree with me. I am fairly certain that the Dreamcast outsold the GameCube in Portugal and sold on par with the original Xbox, except those systems had like 4 to 5 years to reach those lifetime sales. The Dreamcast had only 1 year, so the Sega brand was still very strong, the Sega following. It was still a very popular system, although now it did face severe competition with the PlayStation. Like Nuno said, and very correctly, the market shifted very quickly, just like that. Um, I don't know which system was cheaper at the time, the PlayStation or the Dreamcast. I do know that in Portugal, generally speaking, price is king until very recently, but at least during the Sega years, generally, the cheaper systems were the ones that would sell better. The Master System was cheaper, the Mega Drive was cheaper. The Saturn, I don't think it was cheaper. I think it was more expensive, but I can't remember right now. Um, but the PlayStation was gaining a lot of following, a lot of fans with its games. It was hard to compete with Crash Bandicoot or Spyro or Metal Gear Solid. Even RPGs were finally starting to gain fans. RPGs like would literally have no fans in Portugal until Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy VIII, from what I remember. Or it was
Never
very.
played it.
Sorry.
Never played it.
See,
I don't know. I don't know what's the big hype in that, but I've seen some gameplays and I was like, meh.
but
I'm
RPGs were not very popular.
I'm going to get killed for this.
No, it's fine. But yeah, I would say that I don't. I would say that both the Saturn and the Dreamcast died in Portugal because they had no choice. Basically, because Sega was canceling their systems worldwide, so the Portuguese distributor had no choice. Because I believe that if the Dreamcast hadn't died an early death in worldwide, I believe it would have held a strong second place sales wise. I don't think it would have outsold the PS2, but it would have held a very respectable second place, which is more can be said for the GameCube or the Xbox. At least that's my opinion. But again, a lot of this is conjecture and based on anecdotal evidence, because, like I said, there are no official sales numbers. But hopefully, Roberto and Nuno can either
Yeah,
can give their opinions.
I remember back then with all the DVD fever. That was one of the nails in the coffin for the Dreamcast that didn't play any DVDs. And back then the PS2 was probably the cheapest DVD player you could get on the market, because Sony, Panasonic, Philips, the major DVD manufacturers, their DVDs were like 300, 400 euros, and the PlayStation was like 200 something.
So when they announced that they were going to discontinue the Dreamcast, was it sort of a surprise to you guys, or was it we saw this coming, it's not really that big of a deal, we kind of saw this from a mile away?
Well, I live in a Saturn bubble, so I couldn't care less. But I knew a couple of friends of mine that had the Dreamcast, and I think one of the major flaws that the Dreamcast had was it was so easy to pirate. I have a friend that has had a few original games, and he had a huge spindle of burned games, and even US titles worked.
I actually feel I'm kind of feeling nostalgic that even across the country, or even across the world, the demise of the Dreamcast partially was because of that disc thing.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Diz yourself first.
Okay. I don't know how much. I've heard that the piracy being used as an example, but the thing is, the PlayStation also had a ton of piracy in Portugal, and it was a very popular system. So
Yeah, I remember a cousin of mine bought a small plastic thing that he slided on the CD tray to open the tray while it was loading or something, and he placed the burned CD and played on the PS2. I remember something like that, a swap something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I
the
wasn't.
swap
I wasn't
is-
saying that it was the reason. I was saying that I find it funny that there was still a thing around the world and a thing that people, really participate in per se.
One thing that oh damn it escaped me. Sorry, I was gonna say something that completely escaped me. Sorry. The original question was if there was a sense if the Dreamcast was going to die, or if we all saw it coming. Now I remember what I was going to say. The answer to that is, in my opinion, nobody saw it coming, because at the time I used to read gaming magazines. I was a little older, I had a bit more income, and I would buy a few gaming magazines. And I remember specifically, I was reading the biggest Portuguese gaming magazine called Megascore, and when the announcement was made, and the announcement was published in the magazine, the very next month, like there were a ton of like user letters or reader letters where people, they didn't even understand the concept of Sega dropping the console market. It's like they read it and they didn't understand the article they read it.
Yeah.
It was like, wait, what do you mean that Sega is dropping out? That doesn't make any sense. It's Sega, or why would they be dropping out so soon? Or there was a lot of confusion, and it's like the concept seemed impossible. Like you would read the article and it wouldn't register. It'd be like, man, this isn't happening. It's impossible. You wouldn't even understand it. So I would say there was a lot of confusion, a lot of disbelief, and sadly, in 2001, a lot of dismay.
So it's like
Yeah.
you guys existed in a bubble. It really does seem,
Yes.
because for us in the West, it would have been a foregone conclusion. We'd all been, I mean, as sad as it is, we'd have been like, well, we saw that coming, But with you guys, it's just, it happens, and you're just like, well, wait a second, they're hugely successful. How is this happening?
Yeah,
Why
my
is this happening?
My experience was basically the same as Tiga's. I read about it in a magazine, not Megascore. Didn't like that one too much. I was more of a big gamer guy, but yeah, it was weird to read in a magazine, in the news section, the announcement that Sega was abandoning the console market, because it's weird. I mean, one thing, it's what happened with the Saturn. They were in the game, they started losing, games started drying up, no new releases. You would go to a store and see old games, and it was like a slow decline, and that makes sense from a business perspective. I mean, you can't secure new deals for new ports, you can get new games out there, you do what you can up until the last moment, and then you just cut your losses and you stop releasing new games altogether. Okay, that's one thing. The Dreamcast was like the complete opposite, because one day it's like ahead of the game, it's selling well, it's popular, everyone, or a lot of people at least, either own a Dreamcast already or are thinking of getting one. It's a really popular system, people talk about it, people buy games, um, people play the games, and then you just see the actual company itself making this announcement, reported in various gaming magazines. As I just said, I read it in a different magazine from SEGA, announcing that they're going to withdraw from the battle. It's like, it's one thing for the market to kill your business, to like ruin your chances. It's one thing entirely different. It's an entirely different thing for you to actually choose to stop yourself. So that seemed like suicide. Sega seemed to still have a chance, and not just a chance. Sega still seemed at the time to really be ahead of the game, and then for reasons that we just couldn't comprehend, they decided to quit. I mean, it was nuts. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah, as a kid growing up, I remember exactly where I was when I heard that news that Sega wasn't that Sega was going to stop making consoles. I remember I was a small kid and I was walking with my mom and she said something that she saw on the news, and I was hella bummed. But I'm glad that I'm glad that other people are also bummed, and it's kind of interesting to hear that perspective.
Heading into this topic, obviously, when you guys had heard that they dropped, that came as a shock. When you guys had heard about the Saturn's failure, we can pretty much call it a failure in the Western market, particularly its failure in North America. What was your reaction to that? Like, did that make sense to you, or was that kind of a surprise to hear that it did so poorly here?
I was shocked. I did not see it coming at all.
Yeah.
What about you, Roberto? No, I didn't see it coming literally at all.
Yeah, I have a few copies of Megascore, and it was like a general magazine, a video game magazine. They cover CD-ROM, CDI, Amiga, and also they turned to the console market. But back then, um, I remember in the PS2 and Dreamcast era, uh, another other really good magazines like consoles, and there was one or two big ones back then. They were covering everything from PS2, Nintendo 64, GameCube. Um, and speaking of GameCube, I remember uh, uh, I saw that in stores for 3 months, and then it vanished. It was kind of weird because it has some really small CDs, 8 centimeter CDs, and it wasn't that popular because you couldn't play anything on that, and I mean a CD. Why do I have to buy this cube thing that only plays small CDs? Uh, but yeah, a friend of mine was purchasing all those magazines, uh, and I remember reading an article that Sega was leaving the hardware manufacturing, and they were only launching software, and I was like, what? Back then we started to get access to internet, and but we were on, like David said, we were on our little bubble, and oh, Sony. um, and we are a Sega country. Uh, we had very very good games, and we were like, what? Sega is leaving? There's no more Sega, no console to to fight PlayStation. What is going on? What happened? Uh, I know many people have Sega products. What is going on? And yeah, we are stunned by that.
The
Wow.
question was our reaction to Saturn's perceived failure in the West, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I started going online and becoming aware of what people in other regions thought of the Saturn in general, this coincided with me joining the original Saturn Junkyard project with Simon Early. It started out as a blog. I can't even remember the year, probably around 2007 or 8 or something like that. Um, that was the point in time where I went back to my interest. My let me phrase it another way. My interest in the
I
Saturn
I
came
know.
back.
No, let me interrupt there. I know the junkyard since '06.
Okay, even earlier than I was
Yeah.
thinking. Thanks for that. So I had since moved on from the Saturn, first to the Dreamcast, and then eventually to other platforms like the PC and stuff like that. But eventually, I kind of moving on from my teenage years to early adulthood. I kind of felt some nostalgia towards my first console. That's when I first joined the Saturn Junkyard project, and that's also when I actually bought a new Saturn because, being the dumb kid that I was, I eventually sold my original Saturn, so I had to buy another one. And I quickly modded it because at the time I just couldn't afford games, and they were already becoming hard and expensive. So I just couldn't afford it, and I did what I could. I modded my Saturn, started downloading games and burning CDs like crazy, like trying to experience everything that I missed. And part of that was also going online, talking to other people from other countries, reading articles and stuff like that to know what other people thought of the Saturn outside of Portugal. And when I first encountered these, I mean, I wouldn't just say when I first encountered, to this day, still kind of seems weird to me. This idea, especially not so much in the UK, because Simon Early is British. The Saturn Junkyard originally, you could say, was a British project. So the the things, the scene was a bit different in the UK, I think. But in the US, becoming aware of this whole thing of this idea of the failure of the Saturn as a failed system, as like um, a blunder on the part of Sega, like this spot, this blemish in Sega's history. You know, this bad console that paved the way to ruin. That was the first big mistake. I mean, you can go even earlier and say that the Mega CD and 32X were the first mistakes. But this idea of the Saturn as this really failed machine, this mistake on Sega's part, that shocked me because, as we just said, I mean, for the past 1 hour and a half, we've been saying how in Portugal Sega was amazing and the Saturn was amazing, even though it seemed to die on the spot from one day to the next. For the time that it was alive and healthy, it was kicking ass. It was a great system. People loved Sega. People loved the Saturn. Despite its early death, it was still regarded as a great system. The people who had it, I think most people have no regrets about owning a Saturn. So for me, and I think for us in general, if I may say so, the Saturn is regarded very much as a success on Sega's part, as and also as a very special memory for the people who played with one, who had one as kids. But even from a business perspective, I think it's mostly regarded as a success with its faults, with its drawbacks, but very much as a success. So to see that in the US it's regarded as a huge failure, that was very weird to me, and I think it still is a bit.
Thank you. We appreciate hearing like kind of your perspective on that. And the fact that it's still weird to think of it as a failure in the West to this very day definitely speaks volumes of how successful it was over there. So
One thing we're wondering, is it really common to run into other Portuguese fans of the Sega Saturn even today?
A bit, yeah, I would say yes. In fact, I made a friend in college who was a big nerd, big into games, and he happened to have had a Saturn growing up. So yeah, like the first big nerd friend that I met in college did have a Saturn growing up. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's just representative of just Saturn's popularity.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry. Um, I was gonna say yes, you'll meet a lot of Saturn fans, but I would argue that almost all of them, if not all of them, are like their age ranges starts at 30 at this point.
Oh, I agree.
Like
Yes,
yeah, like
definitely.
anything below 30, no, no,
Yeah,
you're not gonna
definitely.
find
You
any.
had to have been a kid back then.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all
So
about Fortnite nowadays, right?
not even that. Like a lot of kids then grew up with like the PlayStation, PS2, and they'll be like, oh, Metal Gear Solid was so great in Final Fantasy 7 or 8 or 10 or Crash Bandicoot. Like, I've met people who were only like 3 or 4 years younger than me. So I was born in '87. Who were born like in '84, and they didn't even know what a Saturn was at that point. Simply because um, it was right at that switch. They were born right as the switch began to happen, basically. So they didn't have any memories associated with the Saturn. But by that point, it was the PlayStation.
Definitely, I do agree with that. Just um, the just to reinforce that feeling, the friend that I was talking about is 1 year older than me. I was born in '89. He was born in '88. So yeah, just going back a little bit to what we said about the market shift, how it was very sudden, very quick. If you were a kid buying a console, or your parents were buying a console for you for the first time in let's say 96, 97, 98, it was almost definitely a Saturn. Maybe by the end of '98, not so much. If you were buying a console for the first time in '99 or in 2000, it was almost certainly a PlayStation. So just a matter of a couple of years would have changed your perspective on all of this.
That's amazing. I'm curious. I'm curious if any of you guys happen to build any kind of collection off of Saturn's failure, like from bargain bins, or did you experience clearances on Saturn games?
Unfortunately, no. I'm very sorry to say this, but in my case, no.
I didn't have a Saturn back then, so not me either. Maybe Roberto.
Yeah, I have a funny story which I regret. Fortunately, it went and ended up well. I remember back then in '99 or something, we were in the PS2 era. I remember going to my regular video game shop, and on a corner, I saw Burning Rangers and the photo CD operator, and Burning Rangers were a bit pricey than the photo CD, but not as much. Let me think. The photo CD was 15 euros, and Burning Rangers was 20 or 25 back then. Uh, and I brought home the photo CD, but I was so excited to get a new Saturn game back then because everything was vanishing, and I forgot to tell the girl to save me Burning Rangers. I came to the shop the next day with the money for Burning Rangers, and the game was already sold. Luckily, I got a Portuguese copy, mint in mint condition, a few years later at a very good price.
Nice. I'm glad that ended with a happy story, though. Happy ending there.
Yeah, yeah, but I remember back then. I used to find Saturn games in places that didn't even sell games. Like I bought Atlantis in a computer shop. It was on the main on the front window, and I was like, what's this doing here? and I bought the game. It was really cheap, and I remember back then we had an auction website called Meow. It's dead now. OLX uh, came to supreme that, and I remember seeing ads and talking to people. Oh, I want to purchase this game. Do you have any more, or do you know friends that have Saturn games or peripherals or something? And that's the way I used to find my games back then. But everything was vanishing from the shops.
Yeah,
and
in the early
and
2000s, you could find like Saturn games really cheap and really easily on the internet in Portuguese auction websites and whatnot, like Christine said. Um, and I would say you could find games, a lot of rare games for super cheap prices up until 2010, give or take, maybe 2012 at the latest. And then it's like suddenly word got out that, hey, did you know Saturn games are super expensive in the rest of the world? And instead of selling your copy of, let's say, Dynamite Cop, no, sorry, Die Hard Arcade for €10, you could sell it for €100 on eBay. And that's basically where we are right now.
Yeah, I remember. I remember back then answering an ad for a game. I can't remember what game it was, and I got friends of the seller, and he told me I I I bought lots of rare Saturn games from him at very good condition, and he sent me some pictures of his warehouse, and I found out his uncle was the director of Echo Films, the
Oh
main
wow.
the main
Oh, wow.
the main Sega distributor. He lived in Porto, I think. I lost connection with him,
Ah,
but
that's a shame.
yeah, but I bought Jewels of the Oracle. I've got Swagman. Uh, I got very rare games at reasonable prices, and in mint condition, and all were Portuguese copies.
Sticker free, I hope.
Unfortunately, not.
Dang it. Well, you guys have told us some absolutely fantastic stories, and we really appreciate your time. Before we close things out, real quick question for all three of you: if you had to pick like one top favorite Saturn game, what would be your top favorite?
Just one.
Yeah.
Don't do me that. Yeah, because everyone in the community know that I'm a diehard Sega Rally and Daytona player, and I can't choose between them.
Nice. So a tie between those two.
Yeah.
Well,
How
for
about
me
you,
it's
Nuno?
easy. I don't even have to think about it. It would have to be Dragonheart, Fire and Steel.
Wait,
I don't
what?
have that one yet.
You're missing out on the best, man.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
I'm serious, man. It has dragons in it,
Really?
all kinds of dragons. Big
Dragons
dragons,
are cool.
small dragons, flying.
Yep, but is that game
Two-headed.
any? I think that game for sale. I usually just ignore it. Think, oh, it's gotta be terrible. It's good.
Ah,
Nuno likes it.
I like it.
That counts for something.
Nuno likes
Nuno
Lost
recommends.
World too.
Oh, I see.
Not so
You're
much
one
as
of those
Dragonheart.
people.
Radical acceptance.
How about you, Stika?
I think the choice is obvious, so I'm going with virtual highlight. No, I'm just kidding.
Great.
Well, my friend Daniel Smith loves that one.
In all seriousness, I actually
don't
do
know
like
what-
that game. I actually genuinely love that game. But no, it's not my favorite. I would probably go with okay. I'm gonna go with like the most normie choice, I believe. But I'm gonna go with like Shining Force 3, I believe.
Nothing wrong with that.
Either that or Dragon.
Dragon Force?
Thank you, Dragon Force. Either that or Dragon Force. So
Those are
That's a
both
great
great
band.
games.
they're the very normie choices, but yeah, one of those two.
It's okay to go. I wouldn't call them normie. I don't think anything on the Saturn could be considered like the normie choice of anything.
Good point.
Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
good.
You
don't
can
have
edit
to
this
take
out, but you can edit
yeah.
this out because I was gonna say basic bitch choices, but yes.
Well, they might be normie choices in Portugal. Right?
Sorry, if it's not Daizamon 2, like, I don't know what you're doing. You're super normie.
Although Shinobi Legion's also pretty up there for me.
That's a pretty fun game. I was surprised how much I
Thank
liked that
you.
one.
I like
You
that
had
game.
the good soundtrack
It's so
in Europe.
good.
You had the good
The European soundtrack is completely different from the American one.
It is, yes. You had the
I
good
know
one.
people rag on it because of the digitized graphics, but I like it.
I
Nick
love
did a
the
good
digitized
video on
graphics.
that one.
And I love the Power Rangers like cutscenes. They're amazing.
Oh,
I
they're
love
so
them.
good.
Yeah,
They're
they
so
are.
They're so terrible, but like in just the right ways.
So wait, is the American soundtrack bad? Well, I know they're different. I didn't know.
Not terrible. It's just way not as good. Not even close.
Oh, I
Like
did not
it's
know
just so super generic and not outstanding. Whereas Richard Jacques just like blew everybody away with his soundtrack for Shinobi X. Like
Yeah.
the European soundtrack is miles ahead of the American Shinobi
I never
soundtrack.
understood why Sega of Japan didn't just get Yuzo Koshiro, but whatever.
Yeah,
who
it
knows?
grows on you. I will say it kind of grows on you when you play it a lot, but yeah, the Shinobi X soundtrack is better, but
So much better.
by far, yeah.
Well, cool.
All right. So I guess to wrap things up, I just want to thank all our guests today for joining us. I really appreciate your perspective on Portugal and the Saturn, because I know a lot of people don't really know that, especially because they're not from that region or there's a language barrier. So it's good to have people on to sort of talk about those different regions, and hopefully we can do that with other regions of the Saturn as well in the future.
Yeah, thank
yeah,
you guys
thank
for
you for
coming
coming
on.
Anytime, man. It was really fun being here. I really enjoyed it.
Before we go, let's do some plugs. So you can check out Roberto's stuff on the Saturn Junkyard and the Saturn Collectors and Gamers group. You can check out Nuno on the Saturn Junkyard website, YouTube channel, and the Titancast, along with the Facebook group. I don't know. I don't see you post that there very often. Do you still post there a bit?
No, I'm not active there much. I don't contribute much to the
He
community.
has a girlfriend now.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that keeps me busy, definitely. I mostly make videos for the YouTube channel and star in the Titancast. That's it. That's my
Alright.
contribution nowadays.
That's a pretty good one, to be honest. You get a lot of good stuff.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
And you can check out Stika's work on his YouTube channel and check him out on Twitter and do you post on Facebook or is it just Twitter?
I have a Facebook, and I even have like well, today's is difficult day. The other popular social media, Instagram, and also Instagram. No, which what is it? Yeah, Instagram. Sorry, I'm terrible at these things. And I also have Instagram, but like Facebook and Instagram, I post there, but not really my thing. It's basically Twitter and YouTube. Yes.
All right, and you can check him out on there or his Discord group for Stika, and he's got a lot of good stuff. So check him out. I think that's about it. As always, check out SEGA Saturn SHIRO on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and anywhere podcasts aren't sold and uploaded onto. So pretty much I just play SEGA Saturn or SEGA Saturn SHIRO, and of course our website SegaSaturnShiro.com, and check out the SHIRO show. We're doing some news stuff. For those of you who don't know, we're
Yeah, I'm loving those. I've watched every time you launch a new one. I'm there.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
I made sure to wear Sega search for you now, so it's all good.
yeah. It's
That's pretty funny.
it's a new format, and I'm loving it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man.
Yeah.
But yep. But and of course our Discord. You can check that out and see us on Discord, chat with us. Even go into the live streams and some of the and even we do on the podcast we do like fan stuff. So if you want to talk on the podcast, the SHIRO show, hop in and give us your 2 cents.
Sure.
But I think that's about it. So as always, thank you for watching, and you must play Sega Saturn.
SEGA Saturn, SHIRO.
Shiro!
Shiro.
All right.